Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the brand new show called Dear Masuma, the show that will answer your questions and your queries and worries and a shoulder to lean on to help you with your struggles. Today we are here with Masuma Jaffar, a resident alim. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So we've got a brand new show and all viewers are able to access and contact at the end of the show with their queries, and inshallah you can help kind of eliminate any sort of worries anyone may have, inshallah. So shall we just go on to the first question? So this is from one of our viewers, and it says, Dear Masuma, I've been married for 10 years and I do love my husband very much. However, he's not religious and this has been causing us many issues. I always try to encourage him to fast, pray, and not to do things such as drinking. He seems to think that doing un-Islamic things isn't so bad, as at the end of the day that he isn't hurting anyone. And that's the worst thing to do. Sorry, that's worse than sinning against yourself. Please could you advise me what I should do, because I've been trying to fix things for years and there's been no avail, she says. So
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The first thing to recognize is the concept of religious. It's like we tend to categorize people into being religious and non-religious. And I don't think, unless they're openly committing a sin, we can say that they're not religious or that they're religious because I feel that they're religious. It's a matter of whether they're obeying Allah or disobeying Allah. I think that's more important. She actually specifically talks about him not fulfilling his wajibats and doing things like drinking. And she says that he's not hurting anyone. I respectfully disagree, because through the drinking, he could hurt someone because you're not aware of what you're doing once you're drunk. Secondly, he's hurting himself. So he's looking at sinning as a disobedience to Allah, but he doesn't realize that the sinning actually hurts himself and damages himself, which is really important to recognize. And when he's hurting himself, through that he'll be hurting his family and those who love him closest to him, which is his wife and his children.
Of course.
So I think that's really important to recognize. God has talked about the fact that in the Holy Quran, about how drinking is one of the greatest sins. It's a work of shaitan. So it's important to recognize that these sins or disobedience that we do towards Allah, they grow, and it makes you move further and further away from Allah. And therefore, through that, then you become a worse human being in yourself, because the whole concept of Islam is to make you a better human being, a better Muslim, a better Shia, a better someone with good akhlaq. The mission statement of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, was to better the akhlaq, the distinction of akhlaq. So it's important to recognize that the obedience and disobedience to Allah is for our benefit and our harm, rather than for God. I think people think they're doing God a favor when they're fulfilling the wajibats, and they don't realize that it's really for their own benefit that they're fulfilling the wajibats.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as a wife, how could she make her husband kind of understand? Because obviously it seems like he doesn't seem to understand what he's doing is wrong. And obviously when you're put in a position where you have children, she has to think, well, what is she going to do? How can she act, and what are her rights?
So I think it's important to have those conversations where she's actually talking to her husband, having those conversations about how, if they're claiming to be Muslims, what does that mean?
Exactly,
what does it being a Muslim mean? And the concept of submitting to Allah's will, excuse me, is really, really important. Also recognizing that they are the role models for their children, and they will okay things depending on how they act. So if he is, for example, not praying, and what he's telling his children is, God tells you to pray, but I don't see the sense in it, so therefore I won't do it. And as his children grow up, they will okay other things that they don't see the sense in. So it's recognizing that once you open up the doors of disobedience, then you can't choose what your children disobey Allah in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, right.
So that's really powerful to realize that you've been given a gift by God to take care of, and you're responsible for that. And so you're not only doing it for your own self, you're actually doing it for your children as well, role modeling it for your children. She as a wife needs to role model it to her husband. She can't ever be in a situation where she okays him disobeying Allah. She needs to, encourage him. And a lot of the times the encouragement is more powerful done through action rather than words.
Okay.
And if it is through words rather than making it about her, make it about the children, I think that's much more powerful.
Yeah, because like you said, with the children, if she's saying one thing and the husband's doing another thing, it's kind of a conflict between the husband and the wife. Yeah. And obviously the children are kind of going to be the victims of that situation. So like you said, it's quite tricky. So if, for example, say, this wife tried all of these things through actions and things like that, what would be her next steps, like counselling, or what would you recommend? Not obviously we wouldn't say straight, go for divorce. I know it's there, but as Muslims we try to kind of avoid that. But for her, if she had tried all the things that you've suggested, what would be the next thing you would kind of recommend?
So I don't think it's about trying and then saying, okay, this doesn't work, let's move on to the next step. Okay. I think it's continuously continuing with that.
Okay, right.
So, you're constantly role modeling. It's not just, okay, I've role modeled it, he hasn't taken it on board, so that doesn't work, let me try something else. It's just, you have to be persistent with it, yeah.
Okay.
So that's really important. Secondly, I think, yes, bring someone in. It doesn't necessarily have to be counselling. It could just be, conversations that you have with someone that maybe he respects, a third party outside of the marriage, which, you can just facilitate a conversation. Maybe it doesn't even have to be both of them with that person. It may just be him talking to someone. It's again getting him to realize, why does he want to be called a Muslim? What does being a Muslim mean to him? If it's not about submitting to Allah's will, what does it mean? Is he a Muslim because he was born as a Muslim and he's not really thought about what that means? Because a lot of the times we may be born into a religion and we don't actually appreciate the religion. We don't understand what that means. It's like I have this identity, but I don't really know what that identity means to me.
Yeah.
So it's, asking those questions and getting him to think about it and reflect on it is really powerful. And she may not be the right person to do it, depending on what their relationship is like. He may need that from someone else outside of the relationship. He may need it from a man, a friend. He may need it from someone maybe who's a scholar. Again, it depends on him and how he works and what works for him.
Okay.
So she can start those conversations with him, but if she feels like she's not getting anywhere with them, then maybe see, if she can sort of ask someone else to have those conversations with him.
Yeah, would she may need to consider that it could be some sort of mental health issue he may have? Maybe he's had some sort of trauma, like maybe there's a reason behind why he would resort into such things, as in kind of looking out of the box and not thinking, oh, he's just doing a sin. Like maybe there's something that's happened to him in his past.
Yeah, so I mean, there may be things that have happened which has put him off doing certain things. So maybe, he's had a very difficult childhood, and to a certain extent, maybe he blames God for what he's gone through. Maybe he feels like God wasn't there for him. We don't know. These are conversations that she needs to have with him. And again, it's recognizing what being a Muslim means to him.
Okay.
And his relationship with God and how he was brought up as well. Because he may not have had any trauma, but it may just be the way he was brought up. So a lot of children are brought up, if they're naughty or something, they've been constantly brought up with the wrath of Allah. Allah's going to punish you, Allah's going to put you into hell, Allah's angry with you. And it's very difficult to have a relationship with a wrathful God like that. And if he doesn't feel loved, then he may not want to submit to Allah's will. Whereas if you can feel the love of Allah, then you would want to do what he tells you to do, because you recognize that it's for your own good. Whereas when you feel a wrathful God, you're just waiting, you're thinking he's waiting for you to mess up.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's not conducive to a relationship, a loving relationship with that sort of God. So it may not be that he's been through trauma, it may just have been the way that God was presented to him and his relationship with God. But again, these are things that he needs to think about. And a lot of the reflection will happen by asking the right sort of questions. So getting him to think about what does it mean to be a Muslim, getting him to think about his relationship with God. When he thinks of God, what are the words that come into his mind? Is it things like punishment and hell and anger, or is it things like heaven and love and, caring and things like that? Also, looking into the future, what sort of relationship does he want his children to have with God?
Yeah.
How will that affect them as they grow up? Looking at, living in a non-Muslim country, what does he want for his kids? Does he want them to be like everyone else that's out there in the West, or does he want them to be different because they're special, because they've been created, so beautifully, and he wants them to reach their potential? And again, looking at this concept of, again, asking the questions about what's going to happen after death. What does he believe will happen after death? How does he understand this whole concept of God's justice? There's a lot that can be explored.
There is.
So it's again who he's more comfortable talking these things through with, and who he'll actually open up with, and if his wife can actually have these conversations with him without judgment, then he may feel comfortable enough to open up to her, and then they can move forward with that, and she can actually be by his side and help him through the issues that he has and help him on his journey.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, we're talking about now drinking, but there could be other things, like it doesn't necessarily have to be alcohol. It could be like just one partner is more religious than the other partner. So it's still that conflict between the both. And I guess, like you said, it's the identity. Yeah. So he really needs to find out who he is, how he sees himself, before anyone else could really kind of help him out, I guess. But for example, if a wife is too overbearing and too much on, so for example, say that, I'm not saying this wife is, but say if she's too much on his case and constantly reminding him, is that a bad way of going about it? Or should she just relax a little bit and kind of step back slightly?
Yeah, so I think that this is why I began with actually talking about what does religious mean, because it's very subjective. I think it's about obedience and disobedience rather than religious and non-religious, or not being religious. Because I think a lot of the times when you start on your journey towards Allah, and you come across something and you start thinking, okay, I need to be doing more, I need to be reciting more Quran, or praying more, and you automatically think, because you've come to this realization, everyone around you should come to this realization as well. And a lot of the times it's really sad, because in a way Shaitan gets into you and makes you think that you're better than others around you because you're doing more religious stuff. And then you start looking down on others and thinking you're better than them or you're holier than them. And that's really dangerous, because first of all, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of the worship. Secondly, every act can be a worship if it's done with the right niyyah. So if we do it only for the pleasure of Allah and in the way He tells us to do it, then it becomes an ibadah in itself. So whether I'm going out to work, whether I'm taking my kids to school, whether I'm sitting at home reading, whatever it is that I'm doing, it can be an ibadah. It doesn't mean that I have to be praying a salah or reciting the Holy Quran. So to sort of be doing more acts of ibadah and looking down on someone else who I feel is not doing that and thinking I'm more religious is actually a very shaitani way of looking at things.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think when it comes to religious, I don't have a right to judge anyone else's religiosity, because I don't know what their intention is and what their niyyah is, whereas I know what my niyyah is in what I'm doing. And I think most people, when they start trying to get closer to God, that's how Shaitan interjects. He sort of gets you to start doing more and looking down on others, and sort of then you start constantly going on and on at the people around you. You should be praying more, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I think once you start pushing the agenda on, your agenda onto someone else, they switch off. Exactly. So it's really important for us to role model whatever we're doing, whether it's to our spouse or whether it's to our children, rather than constantly be telling them. I'm not talking about wajib and haram, I'm talking about all the mustahabats now, all the recommended acts. Obviously when it's wajib and haram, you have to be a little bit more forceful. But when it comes to the recommended acts, so reciting the Holy Quran, praying extra salah, doing mustahab fast and so forth, that should be role modeled.
Okay, yeah.
And that's enough to role model it, and you shouldn't have to push it at all. And they will do it by seeing you doing it, and they will do it, they will come to a realization how important that is. Whereas if you keep badgering someone about it, they not only switch off, but they start then building walls, and they start sort of pushing back and refusing to do it.
And they might even go away from the religion altogether,
Exactly.
which is quite common even within kind of the youth in society nowadays. So yeah.
I think that's really important, especially when you're talking to the children, is to make sure, if as a parent you can sort out the wajib and haram, then you've done your duty. Everything else will come because you've protected their soul through the wajib and haram. And the soul will then just grow, and as it grows, they themselves will want to do the mustahabat.
Yeah.
I think we focus on all the extras, and we forget what we were like as children.
Exactly. It's so true, yeah.
So that's really important. But yeah, I think there is so much here that needs just communication, I think. If conversations are being had on this, on certain levels about what's going on in his head, getting him to reflect, thinking about it, thinking about how it's affecting her and the children, how it's affecting him, his relationship with God. There's so many things that he could, they could discuss. And as long as she can discuss it with him without being judgmental, I think he would be open to it. Yeah. Hopefully.
So I know you mentioned that she should try and communicate with her husband, kind of to find out what's really going on. How would you advise her, to kind of take those steps to start that discussion?
Okay. I think if she actually puts him on the spot and says to him, so what does it mean to you to be a Muslim, and what's your relationship with God like? And I think then he's going to sort of move away. He's going to feel very much, as if he's been put on the spotlight, and it's going to be very uncomfortable for him. So maybe actually start talking about what it means to her. Okay. So come from the perspective of, okay, I was born a Muslim, and this is what Islam means to me, and why Islam is important. Why do I pray? And things like that. Or she could come from a perspective of, if she's heard a lecture or read something, she can, I read this or I heard this. Can we do, what do you think? What are your views on this? And this is how I'm thinking. What do you think? So actually just making it very relaxed, and very much sort of, she's asking his advice rather than she's putting him on the spot and getting him to, sort of look at himself deeper, because that's very uncomfortable for most people. So she can do it in a very relaxed way. One of the things that really helps is when you look at how you've been brought up with Islam. So a lot of the times when we're brought up with Islam, it's a matter of do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do that. And generally we've not, our relationship with God is built through how we follow those do's and don'ts, rather than actually proactively being taught to have a relationship with God. So the aqaid aspect, the belief in one God, the belief in his justice, the prophethood, the Aima, the day of judgment, all of that is not actually taught or explained until we sort of go into madrasa, where it's taught as a subject sort of thing. But as we're growing up, we're constantly being told by our parents, you have to pray, you have to wear hijab, you have to, fast, you mustn't lie, you mustn't drink, you mustn't do this, And it literally feels like you're in a jail, and you're just constantly being told what not to do and what to do. And everyone else around you, all your friends who are non-Muslims, seem to be having a really good time and are much more relaxed than you are. And because you don't understand why these do's and don'ts are there. if we change that, and if we actually got our children to have a relationship with God, understood that God tells us what to do and what not to do because he's trying to help us reach our potential. He's created us as a spiritual being, as a soul, which he's put into our physical body. And because we live in a physical world, we can take care of our physical body, but our physical body is not what's important. The physical body will be left behind as we move on our journey. So it's our soul, our spiritual being, that is what is important. And if we can, because we live in a physical world, we don't know how to take care of us, ourselves, our spiritual being. God, out of his love and mercy, has given us the rulings, the wajibat and the haram. So everything that he's made wajib is things that we absolutely require in order for our soul to be kept healthy. The things that he's made haram are things that are absolutely detrimental to the soul. So if we can recognize it understand it from that perspective, then we're more passionate to follow it, because now I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually, because you're thinking of what is good. It's like when you're eating healthily and you see the outcome of, okay, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to get fit. You're feeling it because you know it's for yourself. You're doing it. Your motivation is for yourself. So and even if same thing.
And even if you're seeing someone else eating a chocolate, although you want that chocolate, you won't, because you can see the benefit of it.
Yes, exactly.
So it's exactly the same thing. You can see other people doing things, but you won't want to do those because you can see the benefit of you not doing those things, and you can see the benefit of you doing the things that God has told you to do.
Subhanallah, yeah.
So it makes it much more, inherently we're very selfish human beings. We do things for ourselves. So if I can see the value in it for myself, then I will be more driven to do it. And that's why I'm saying he says he's not harming anyone, but he's harming himself. And if he recognizes that, then that'd be quite powerful. But going back to the way his wife tells him, if she's telling him in a lecture form, he's going to switch off. So she can come from a perspective of, oh, I heard this about the soul. What do you think? Because I was thinking it makes a lot of sense, but I don't know whether this works or that works. And you're just having a conversation about it and discussing it, and then just leaving it. Because if you leave it, he'll think about it. Yes, you just have to plant those questions and then just leave it. He may not answer those questions at that moment, but hopefully he'll go away and think about it. And then you can bring it up later on. Oh, do you remember we discussed this? I was thinking about it, and this is what I came up with. What are your views on it? So it's not putting him under the spotlight, but but having those conversations where you're coming from, this is how I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking. What are your views on it? Yeah,
no, that's a really good way and kind of concept to kind of use. And I guess it's a lot more simpler than you actually think, because when you think of these things, you think, oh my God, it's going to be so difficult. How am I going to actually open up and discuss these issues? But how you've simplified it that way, inshallah, this woman is able to use it and others too.
And I think the other thing is also to think about, maybe there's a lot of learning for her from having a husband like this, because a lot of the times we always think, I'm there to help him, but through his actions, maybe he's helping her as well, because for her to have these conversations with him, she needs to know what her belief system is and how she feels about her relationship with God. So it might actually strengthen her relationship with God and her, submission to Allah, inshallah.
Yeah, no, subhanallah. No, inshallah, hopefully that's helpful for the sister, as you said. And everyone is faced with lots of different tests and trials. And inshallah, we keep you in our prayers and du'as. And if anyone else does have any questions and concerns that they'd like to raise with Sister Masuma, please call or send in your questions, and we'll try our best to answer any of your queries. And thank you so much, Sister Masuma, for joining us today, and thank you for watching us, dear viewers, and inshallah we'll see you next time for another episode of Dear Masuma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.